Cop was shot 11 times and then run over 3 times. And how doesn't he die on the scene? He dies later in the hospital? I'll tell you what, that's tough cop. Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. I got a good video for you. I am going to be reviewing a video on the Texas 7. Yes, the Texas 7. And there were notorious 7 guys who escaped the Texas prison in the year 2000. But it was a pretty wild spree they went on and escape they went on. So let's jump right into this video.
7 men at a maximum security prison in Texas are just about to perform an audacious, if not brazen, prison escape.
This escape is audacious, and Texas is known, especially back then, as one of the tougher prison systems in the country. They got a lot better now, to be honest.
I had no parole, I had no good time, I had no incentive to behave. The minimum amount of time I had was 270 years, and I obviously couldn't do that.
Now, I had to stop it because you're going to see all the time these guys are facing. Listen, I was in a maximum security prison when we had 880 guys had life sentences. 880 out of 2,000 had life sentences. And what that means, everybody, is that's letters. They actually call it letters. And if you have letters, you are looking to escape. Trust me. I knew many of my friends are trying to escape, and more power to them because I do the same thing.
The story of the Texas 7. Before we describe how these men managed to get out of maximum security prison and tell you about the horrors of what happened after they got out, let's first introduce the team. We have the ringleader, George Rivas, and you know he was never...
They're introducing a team of very, very dangerous guys. Look at the timing they got. 18 consecutive 15 to life.
But he was convicted
Wow.
of aggravated kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and burglary.
Always more to a story, and that is it. Aggravated kidnapping.
Then we have Joseph Garcia, who was serving life for killing a man in a drunken altercation. Randy Halprin was doing time for badly beating a baby. He got
Beating a baby. This guy they should kill.
50 years for rape and acts of voyeurism. Patrick Murphy had 50 years to serve for aggravated assault, a particularly nasty crime against a woman. Donald Newberry...
Aggravated assault, got 50 years. That's a pretty tough time. I don't care what kind of assault it is. And that's Texas, everybody. What can I do?
These are the Texas 7.
Hiring a man to kill his wife.
At some point, the men began meeting at the John B. Connolly unit at the prison. Getting out of such a place was...
Now, this is a maximum security prison. We all know that in Texas. Texas was known as a very incarceration state, I call it. So is Pennsylvania. Those are pretty high on that.
For their chow. The guards then went for their lunch. Only Rivas, Garcia, Halprin, Harper, and Newberry were left in the maintenance area because they had managed to convince the maintenance supervisor that they had to wax the floors there. They told him that they would take lunch in this area. The supervisor said, fair enough.
That's pretty normal. People work various jobs, and they work off like if there's nobody in the chow hall, they'll do the floors, stuff like that. And they were pretty smart to do that. I've seen stuff like this happen all the time. When I was in Atlanta, you'd have guys do stuff like that. They'd work in the kitchen, they'd work certain areas, and obviously, there's so many layers to an escape. That's why this one is real interesting. Hey everybody, I got a new sponsor. It's called MyBookieAG. Yes, MyBookieAG is my sponsor. My promo code is Lawton. It helps us a lot. It helps this channel if you go sign up. They have a match where you actually make money. You actually put up $50, you get $75. You put up $100, you get $150. You can't beat that, and it helps this channel as well. You could do live sports, you could do regular sports, you could do end-of-year sports, you could do prop bets, you could do in-game bets. There's so many things, all sports, baseball, hockey, soccer, anything you want to bet, you can bet on mybookie.ag. Use promo code Lawton. That's my last name, Lawton. Use promo code Lawton and you get 50% match. Meaning you put up $100, you get $150. Put up $50, you get $75.
But he'd have to stay behind with them. Murphy, working in another area, asked to join the crew, and he was given the green light. As for the last of the group, Rodriguez, he managed to join the crew after lying to the guards that he had been told he had to pick up trash there. He wasn't initially part of the escape plan, but he became so. The men were all joined together just as they had planned. Then they had told the supervisor to follow them to a warehouse where they needed something. There, they got him down on the ground, stole his clothes, and left him tied up in a small electrical room. The crew found more clothes, but more importantly, they got the keys to the room where the tools were stored.
Pretty smart. They smart enough to know that there were more uniforms. They were smart enough to get the uniforms off these two guards tie them up. Not hurting them right now, doing anything. They're just escaping.
In that room, they managed to get their hands on 2 hacksaws, a bolt cutter, wire cutting pliers, and a utility knife. Over the next 2 hours, they would get more clothes and the things they needed after subduing 2 prison guards as well as other inmates. Some of those hostages would get out of their restraints, but the gang would make sure they couldn't get out of the room that they'd been tied up in. With the clothes they'd stolen, the gang could now pretend to be...
Now look, they stole all those clothes. They even tied up other inmates. Talk about smart. Because they were smart enough to know that some of these inmates are snitches. Yes, snitches. There's a lot of snitches in prison. Obviously, look at them. They all dress up like guards. How that's going to go and how they get through the main things, that's the big one. But I love their ingenuity. They're figuring it out. How to get to the next level, This is good.
Be supervisors, and that they did. They could also make sure the head count was right, although they were of course missing. Around this time, things could have gone wrong because one of the hostages in the room set the fire alarm off, but it was taken as a false alarm. The men in disguise then approached the gate where heavily armed guards were. They told the guards that they had a job to do, and that was to install video cameras. The guards let them through the gate and importantly did not ask for any ID. They came upon another guard at a gatehouse, and this one did ask for ID. But then the gang had been clever because they had left one guy in the maintenance department. That guy actually called the gatehouse to ask him if the men had turned up to install the video cameras. After this,
figuring this out, not one of those other guards knew their employees, knew that these 7 guys actually conned these other guys to get through the gate, to get into a thing without asking for ID, and then the one guy asked for an ID, and then they had left the guy back to say, yeah, we did this. Doesn't anybody know who they work with? I mean, I get there's a lot of guards that work in these facilities, but 7 guys all knew? I mean, come on, either they're pretty stupid guards or, you know what, maybe they, it's almost hard for me to believe that doing time in all these places, not one of these guards kind of recognized one of these inmates. That's kind of like hard for me to believe, but we're going to keep going.
the men subdued this guard and tied him up. Meanwhile, Halpern gained access to one of the towers, where an armed guard was stationed. Halpern later said in interviews that this guard had a lot of weapons on him, so he quickly lunged to grab one of his guns and pointed it at him. He then ordered the guard to open the vehicle gate. After that, he gained entrance to the armory, where he would take a lot of weapons from there. The stash of weapons included a 12-gauge Remington pump-action shotgun.
Wow, look at all the weapons they took. Wow, 357 mags, Smith shotguns, 14, 210 rounds of ammunition. Wow, 12-gauge shotguns.
With 15 rounds. Now, these guys were certainly very dangerous.
These guys are armed and dangerous.
These weapons in a stolen truck. After they were well out of sight of the prison, one of the tied-up guards got loose and reported the escape. So now we have 7 criminals with histories of violence let loose in Texas, and worse.
That is amazing. I mean, they got away in a stolen truck with all of this armor, and all of a sudden, after they leave the premises, one of the guys gets out of the hostage situation in the room. It's really weird also that there's no other way to get out of that room. They set the alarm off, the fire alarm, and they said it was a false alarm. I mean, that alone, how do you shut her down? Somebody shut that down and didn't go check. Because they did this pretty slick. I got to say that. Hey, everybody. Also, please, thank you, Discord. Thank you very much, Red Phoenix, all the guys on Discord, all the suggestions. We really love you. Please check out my book, Gangster Redemption. We got lighters coming out, the cigars, everything's going on. My podcast channel, The Real Deal with Larry Lawton, a YouTube podcast channel. Everything's going up. Check it all out.
They're armed to the teeth. The authorities put word out that very dangerous criminals were driving around and they were heavily armed. The manhunt was on, but nothing was going to be easy for the authorities. At the same time, the guards found 3 letters left by the gang, with some of those letters decrying the harsh conditions inside. One of the letters said, "You haven't heard the last of us yet." The authorities would take this as a threat, although the writer of that letter would later say that this was not the case at all.
We do know that conditions in prison, especially back 20 years ago, and I was in at this time. This is town 2000. I was in prison at this time when this escape happened. This was in the state of Texas, not in the federal system. In 2000, I was at Coleman, Florida, 2000, and then I went back. Then I got shipped to Jessup, and after Jessup, I ended up going back to the penitentiary. But this happened in 2000, so I know what the conditions were like in prisons, and they were pretty bad. Obviously, Texas was known as that as well. And I was in prison with a lot of Texas guys, too. The Texas AB, they call them, stuff of that nature. So this doesn't shock me.
The men now have weapons, but they don't have much money. They do what they know best, and that's steal.
They don't have money, but they got a lot of weapons, I'll tell you that.
But then go back just before closing time. There are still some customers in there and 4 employees in total, all of whom are subdued. What's strange is the hostages said the gang were very friendly. Later in interviews, this gang said throughout the entire ordeal, they tried their best not to hurt.
Listen, they don't have to. They're not. Listen, everybody thinks just because you got a rough record, like I had, that you're crazy, that you're automatically going to do something. You're not. They said it and they meant it. They're not out to hurt people. Obviously, they really had me smiling when they said Radio Shack, since there's no Radio Shack anymore. But obviously, these guys didn't try to hurt people off Jump Street. Now, listen, I'm not saying they're not dangerous. I'm not saying I wasn't dangerous. But nobody's trying to hurt anybody. Just remember that. And I look at people. Listen, I know people are going to look at me and say, Larry, they are crazy. They did this and they, all the crimes. Yes, the guy hits a baby and all this kind of stuff is crazy. But listen to me. I met a lot of guys in prison with worse records than these guys. And I hung out with them. And they weren't bad people. They made bad choices. They did bad things. Some of them are probably bad people. But they're showing it right now. Even the people said, like when I robbed, some people said he was a nice guy.
Anyone, but as you'll see, that certainly did not happen. We should also state that during the hostage taking in the prison, people were held at knife point and also hit over the head or punched in the face. They stole thousands of dollars from the store, as well as electrical equipment, which included walkie-talkies and police scanners.
Of course, they knocked some guards out and put knives to their throat. I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to do what they got to do.
But they wanted more. On Christmas Eve, they decided to rob an Oshman Sporting Goods in Irving, Dallas County. They got to the store, bound and gagged the staff, and it said stole thousands of dollars as well as more than 40 different guns and lots of ammunition. But while this
40 different guns stolen at Oshman Sporting Goods. Well, these guys are coming armed.
Called the cops, and 29-year-old police officer Aubrey Wright Hawkins turned up. Almost immediately, he came under fire. The officer was shot at different angles by perhaps 3 of the crew. Because they were firing from different sides of the car, at least one of the crew was hit. The officer was shot 11 times, with many of the bullets entering his head. He was then run over 3 times and left for dead. He actually died later in the hospital.
Now that's something. The cop was shot 11 times and then run over 3 times. And how doesn't he die on the scene? He dies later in the hospital? I'll tell you what, that's tough cop. That's their problem. They went crazy. And listen, they didn't want that cop to catch him.
He was married and had a son, and he was expected
That's a shame,
to celebrate Christmas with his family the next day. Later in an interview, his mother would say that his son said all he wanted for Christmas was his father back.
That is sad, and I have a heart. Everybody knows that.
They'd even made a gun rack for their many weapons. They later parked this at a Christian community and posed as missionaries, saying they
now these guys are posing as missionaries on a Christian missionary. That's a good one.
Did attend Bible class and seemed to get into it. In interviews,
oh my gosh, they were on the road for over 30 days, guys.
Was welcome to the classes, but as time went by, the men
and of course it had to be Larry that was welcome to the classes
because someone noticed his face and the fact that he had a twitch. The police were called, but at first thought it just couldn't be the gang because there was no way they would have been stupid enough to stick together. Police soon knew they had their men and believed there could be one huge gunfight, but that didn't happen. First, Garcia, Rodriguez, and Rivas were arrested while driving around in a Jeep. After that, police went back to the park to get the other men, and there they found Halpern and Harper. The former gave himself up, but Harper put a gun to his head and killed himself. He left the Bible
killed himself. Left the Bible open. I guess God told him to kill himself. How do they stick together?
Newbury and Murphy hid out through most of January and then told authorities that they'd hand themselves in if they could make a TV appearance. The
And
authorities
two
agreed,
more.
and the two men went on TV and
Check that
denounced
out.
the criminal justice system. They said the system is as corrupt as we are. Newbury told the camera, "The way I see it is I had to make a statement. Our judicial system in the state of Texas has really gone to pits."
All they wanted to do, two of them to turn themselves in, is to make a statement to the TV to show how corrupt the system is. That, it blows me away. Believe me, in 2000, the system was so corrupt. I was abused violently in prison, and that's all true. So they're not lying about the system. In all states, Fed being very corrupt, very broken, and you had nothing coming. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying these guys are good guys. I'm saying that the whole system, and not everybody is a bad guy. And people make mistakes, as most people do, and they shouldn't be treated the way they are.
We're receiving 99 years for a robbery for $68. Nobody injured.
One guy got 99 years for a $68 robbery. Come on.
And he got 99 years.
You expect people not to go crazy?
You've got to face the music, but there's got to be something within reason in the state of Texas. They're giving kids so much time that they'll never get to see light again. Their life is gone. Now all they are is a roach in a cage. These words wouldn't save him. The authorities and the public had seen how these men killed a young father on Christmas Eve. People were furious. The men were sentenced to death. In 2008, Rodriguez was the first to go, having said he didn't want to appeal.
All of them were sentenced to death. Did you hear that? Sentenced to death. You know, talk about now, Texas has changed. Texas has changed a lot. It was actually starting to change when I was in 2000. When I got out in 2007, Texas was changing. And I've heard it's been changing ever since in a positive way, because they realized that the long sentences and corrupt system wasn't working.
Further, 2012, the ringleader Rivas was the next to go. Before he was executed, he said this to the family of the slain police officer: "I do apologize for everything that happened. Not because I'm here, but for closure in your hearts. I'm ready to go." Newbury was executed in 2015 and Garcia was executed in 2018. Halpern and Murphy are still in prison, with Murphy being the only one of the two who has an execution date. He's scheduled to die by lethal injection in November, so by the time you watch this show, that might already have happened. The case of Halpern has caused much controversy. He's been scheduled to be executed, but then his trial judge was accused of racial discrimination. Halpern is Jewish, and the judge was...
Oh my God.
Racial slurs.
Now, look at that. The Jewish guy claiming racial discrimination against the judge, and that doesn't surprise me. Obviously, all of these guys. I don't believe in the death penalty. And for these guys to be executed the way they just were, and it just blows me away. The other guy, got killed already too. So this video that came out a while ago blew me away because of the harshness of the penalties. Yes, they killed this cop. Which one of them? I guarantee you, with forensics, they could have said which guys killed those guys. And probably the guys said who did it. They don't want to all die over that.
And also said Jews need to be shut down because they control all the money. The Washington Post wrote that after that, Halpern's attorneys demanded a new trial. It got worse for the judge, according to the Post, because other people called him a lifelong racist who had vented anger on many occasions against lots of...
Looks like that judge really is a
The
racist.
newspaper wrote that this judge is
Saying the Jews control all the money and they need to go to prison. That's the judge saying that. That's crazy.
Spurring a lot of the American public to ask how this man became a judge. With this in mind, asked Halpern's attorneys, how could any non-Christian, non-white person receive a fair trial? And that's
can't.
where the story of the Texas 7 ends. For now.
They can't. They can't. They cannot receive a fair sentence from a judge saying that all Jews control the money, so we should get rid of them. This is what the judge said. How does that guy become a judge? Some of the stuff that still blows me away into this country, it just shocks me. But I love infographics because I love the way they explain an escape. I really do. I think it's just amazing that these guys got away. They were pretty smart to get away. Why in the world did they stick together? If they would have split up, they would have still been out. Obviously, they could have been out. They were out over a month, and they were in a Christian group. I didn't get that. And they stuck together. That just blew me away. But that's what happens. People who do escape usually get escaped because they don't plan out the long or the future. Obviously, they could have gone a long way in a month and been somewhere else. At least one or two of them. I don't get that either. But listen, I'm not saying they're the smartest characters in the world, but they were smart to get out. But obviously, you know, hopefully Texas changed a little. Most systems, hopefully, they're changing. I'm not buying it though. I think we need a revamp of the whole criminal justice system. But I love infographics. You guys have a great day. Stay safe. Please don't make choices like this. Don't do things to go to prison, even if it's a $68 thing that got 99 years. That's stupid. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.